What's up everybody, my name's FromSoftware, and recently I was fortunate enough to take part in the Elden Ring closed network test. If you're not familiar with my content, I stream full-time on Twitch, and I have been obsessed with the FromSoftware games since November 2020. So I am relatively new to the games, but after playing Demon's Souls on the PS5, I went back and played all of the games in their entirety, and I loved them. Now in this particular video, I'll be talking about my experience with Elden Ring over the closed network test, and what is new. I'll also have 2 other videos coming up showing the boss fights with no commentary, because I know a lot of people out there just want to see straight gameplay. And the 3rd video will be all about why I think Elden Ring will be a fantastic one for new players to jump into. But with that being said, let's jump into this video. Welcome to Elden Ring. I'll be talking about things in order of my experience and then go through and touch on each individual part with more detail. I really want this to be a video that someone who's never played a FromSoft game can understand, as I truly believe that this will be a fantastic place to begin that journey. So firstly, let's talk about the classes and the character creation. In the closed network test, there were 5 available builds to play, and these were pre-made for us. There was a warrior, an enchanted knight, a prophet, a champion, and a bloody wolf. In this video, I'll be showing gameplay of a bloody wolf and an enchanted knight. Upon release, Elden Ring will have 10 classes that can be customized to how you'd expect from a FromSoft game, and the characteristics can also be changed throughout your playthrough. Once I selected my character, I was then transported to the Fringefolk Hero's Grave. This is the starting area of the game, and it leads us to the Cave of Knowledge, which is the tutorial. The Cave of Knowledge is obviously the first thing that you'll want to do, as this is the tutorial, and whether you're a seasoned FromSoft player or completely new, this will help you get your head around the specific mechanics that make Elden Ring unique. Jumping down into the cave will cause you to take damage, which kicks off your first part of the tutorial, the Flasks. In Elden Ring, your HP flask is called a Flask of Crimson Tears, and your FP is called a Flask of Cerulean Tears. It's so metal, it sounds like you're drinking the tears of your enemies, and I'm so here for it. Now the first thing that we spot in the Cave of Knowledge is a little golden gem, and this is the Site of Grace, aka bonfires. This is your safe space to restore your HP and FP and heal any status ailments. These sites will also refill your flasks and act as a fast travel point, which I'll talk about a little more later. As with the previous games, resting at this site will of course revive the enemies you've just defeated, so be ready for a fight once you leave. Something that is unique about the Sites of Grace in Elden Ring is when you've not yet rested at a site, they actually emit rays of light which make them easier to spot from a distance. They will also shine a beam of light towards your current objective, and that's something that's not been present in the previous games. Yay for direction! Of course, there are many things you can do at these sites, like leveling up once you've completed some objectives, distribute your HP and FP flasks depending on your build's needs, memorize spells, sort your inventory, and newly to Elden Ring, pass time. Yes, there is a morning, day, and night cycle in Elden Ring, but we'll talk more about that later. In terms of combat, it feels a bit like a mix between Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro, which is honestly what I was hoping for. In the closed network test, my bloody wolf started with a bastard sword and an iron round shield, which meant I could strike and parry the enemies. I will admit though, I quickly changed over to two-handing my sword and leaving the shield out of it, as that's my preferred playstyle, and parrying's never been my strong suit. The sword I was using also had a thunderbolt skill, and that's what they're called in Elden Ring, that allows me to strike the enemies from afar with a bolt of lightning. These skills consume FP, so you may want to keep a Flask of Cerulean Tears around if you plan to use your skills often. The dodge rolling feels a lot like Dark Souls 3, and for me, it felt like the iframes were quite forgiving. Much like Sekiro, your character can jump, praise the sun. This also opens up the ability for some air combat, as you can do jumping strikes and heavy attacks that deal some serious damage. Stealth is a welcome addition to Elden Ring in my opinion, as it offers the player more ways to approach an encounter. Using tall grass, you're able to sneak around and get some extra damage on an unsuspecting enemy, and even pull off backstab. Now our first fog wall looks absolutely epic, but prepare yourself for a very anticlimactic fight. The soldier of Godric would definitely get his ass kicked by Gunda, but I think it's a good introduction into what a boss arena may look like for players who might be new to the FromSoftware games. And with that absolute beatdown, that's the end of the tutorial. So we'll make our way over to our first area of the Lands Between, which is Limgrave. Now, before we do anything else, I wanted to do a little section for people who may be brand new to the FromSoftware games. If you've never played one of their games before, you may not be familiar with the HUD, so let's quickly touch on that. Starting up the top, the red bar is your current HP or hit points, which I think most people understand. If it reaches 0, you die. The blue is your FP or focus points, which is drained upon the use of any skills and sorcery. The green bar is your stamina gauge, which is your ability to maneuver, strike, and block, and if it drains completely, you won't be able to perform any of those movements until it regenerates. Your stamina will regen automatically as time passes, but what is unique about Elden Ring is stamina is not consumed while in a non-combat state. So you can dodge roll and sprint around the map to your absolute heart's content while in a non-combat state, and you don't have to worry about stamina draining. This is going to make exploration on the map so much easier while you're off your mount, which we'll talk about a little later. The random name on the left-hand side of the screen is your current skill, which could be something like a parry for a shield, a spinning attack for a twin blade, or a badass vortex with a greatsword. The numbers on the bottom right are your runes, which are basically your XP and currency points. You use runes to level up, buy from traders, upgrade weapons, etc. And lastly, the squares on the bottom left are your equipment slots. These show your current equipped weapons and equipment like healing flasks, buff items, and multiplayer items. So touching back on the Sites of Grace, as I mentioned earlier, they do have some unique functions in Elden Ring that bonfires have not had in the past games. Now, I'm kind of expecting the elitist Soulsborne players to be a bit salty about this option, but I for one really appreciate that the Sites of Grace actually guide you along your path. Traditionally in the Soulsborne games, you'd have to try to figure out where you're supposed to go from item descriptions, conversations with NPCs, and things like that. And for me doing my first playthroughs, that made it incredibly difficult to know where to go. I was just really fortunate to have some trusted people in my chat that helped me head in the right direction when I was completely lost. But now the game actually provides that aid with Grace's guidance. It's a subtle change, but I am all for more accessibility, and if this helps people stay on track and stay more focused and understand where they're supposed to go, which results in them actually continuing the game and finishing it, then that's amazing. Navigation in the FromSoft games is always really tricky, so I think this is a great quality of life addition. I think it's going to make it much more accessible, and I love that it's called Grace's Guidance. So not only will the Sites of Grace actually point in the direction with a little subtle golden glow, but also if you open up your map, the Sites of Grace will have small arrows indicating the general direction that you'll want to go to. The Sites of Grace also act as a fast travel point, which you can do at any point during your playthrough, apart from when you are in dungeons. But you just open up your map, select the site you'd like to travel to, and bam, you're exactly where you want to be. And again, for me as a streamer and people that might be a little bit more time poor, this is such a nice quality of life addition to the game, and it will mean less time backtracking through areas and more time fighting enemies and bosses. As I've mentioned, the Sites of Grace are where you will level up your character only after you've spoken to Melina, and your rune fragments are basically your souls or your echoes or whatever you want to call them that you get from slaying enemies to level up, spend on trading and leveling up weapons. Now for us mere mortals that can't do no death playthroughs in the FromSoftware games, dying is usually inevitable, so there are two places you can respawn. When that inevitable death comes knocking, you can choose to either revive at a Site of Grace, or if there is a stake of Marika nearby, you can opt to respawn at that location instead. And I have no idea how to say stake of Marika, I'm not sure, but ultimately it leads to less backtracking, which is great. Speaking of respawns and fast travels, let's talk about the map. When you first open up your map before discovering too many Sites of Grace, it will be quite bare. You will also need to find a map fragment to reveal the full detail of the surrounding area. In the closed network test, you find the map of Limgrave's western region to help navigate around the place. And the map fragments that you find will reside in your key items. They also have a bit of a small description of the location it belongs to. The map allows you to fast travel to Sites of Grace that you've discovered and also set beacons. However, there are some limitations to fast traveling when you're in some dungeons, but I don't think there were any dungeons in the network test. As I've already touched on, I am definitely for fast travel. I think it's a great quality of life addition, especially in these types of games. Now, I'm honestly not sure how large the map will be in regards to what I've experienced, but judging by the small part of the variety that we got to see in the test, I'm so excited to continue to explore the lands between. You may have also noticed there is a compass at the top of the screen, and this will show you your landmarks, any beacons you've placed down, and if you've inevitably died, it will show you the location of your runes, so you can go back over there and retrieve them. And again, as someone who struggles with navigation, I'm so freaking happy to see a compass and a map in Elden Ring. As I touched on a little earlier in the video, there is the day and night cycle. So when you go to a site of grace, you can pass time, and there are 3 time settings available: morning, afternoon, and nightfall. Weather conditions will change, ambient noise varies a ton, and even creatures and enemies behave differently depending on the time of day. I noticed a cauldron of bats were perched under a dark cave when it was daytime, but at night they are out flying around freely with their buddies, ready to attack at any point. Now, you can absolutely go up and aggro these nocturnal enemies during the day, but you can also easily avoid them if you don't want to engage. Obviously, as I only had a very limited time with the network test, there could be other synergies with the night cycle that I didn't discover, but only time will tell. There could be things like night-specific plants that come out when the sun is gone for higher level crafting, and maybe specific enemies. We'll have to see. Speaking of which, crafting seems like it will be quite an important part of Elden Ring. All of the little creatures that are cruising around the world can be vanquished for materials, which can then be used in crafting. You will need to purchase a crafting kit from a local trader first, and then you can extend your crafting repertoire by finding cookbooks. All of the creatures around the open world really do make it feel so much more alive, and they can actually be the difference between life or death. If you manage to vanquish an entire enemy group, you will replenish your flasks. The number and type of flasks to be replenished does vary depending on the enemy group, and of course you cannot replenish more flasks than your maximum amount allows. I really like this addition to the game because there are a few times where I'd be out exploring away from a site of grace with no flasks, and all I had to do was just kill a few sheep or a few of the little cute fluffy things that I feel really bad about killing, but you get your flasks back and it can literally be the difference between living and dying. While we are on the topic of adorable creatures, another new mechanic in Elden Ring is your mount. I'd like to introduce you all to the wonderful Torrent, the Spectral Steed. You can summon Torrent with your Spectral Steed whistle in certain areas, but there are limitations to where they can be summoned. For example, not inside caves or in most boss arenas. However, they can be incredibly helpful with big enemies like dragons. If you'd like to see me kill a dragon pretty much entirely just with riding on the back of Torrent, check out my other video of beating all the bosses in the closed network test. You can fight while mounted on your steed, which definitely takes a bit of getting used to, but once you understand how to slash from both sides and use heavy attacks to knock other enemies from their mounts, it's a very interesting way to approach combat in Elden Ring. Torrent has a speed boost and a double jump, so you can quickly speed out of a sticky situation if you manage to dodge incoming enemy attacks. But it also opens you up to get stomped on like I did with this group of very angry crabs. There are also areas on the map where you can perform a Spirit Spring jump, which is essentially a big wind current that you ride on your steed to jump to great heights. You won't take any damage from jumping into a Spirit String while on horseback, but that doesn't mean that Torrent has no fall damage. Trust me, I tested it many times, absolutely intentionally. Now, if Torrent does perish in combat, you are absolutely able to bring them back, but you will need to use one of your Crimson Flasks. Something that just came to mind as well that I noticed in a few of the mini-boss fights and the boss fights were the Destructible Environments. Beyond a few crate smashing here and there, parts of the environments like trees and things would actually fall down after bosses dodge into them, which I thought was just a nice little immersion touch. There are some high-risk, high-reward encounters, and I'm just going to call them Caravans because I don't know their official name. But there are these big caravans that are guarded by so many enemies and pulled by these big 2 giant creatures. The first time I saw it, I just did not even know how to approach it. There's knights on horses, there's dudes with horns, like signaling everybody. It's just a whole thing. You will need to kill all of the surrounding enemies to have access to the loot in the back of the wagon. I tried to just stealth in and jump on the back of the wagon and steal the loot, and it did not work. It's quite tough to get it, but the gear that you get is pretty decent. I mean, just look at this weapon art. It's so freaking good for crowd control, so long as you don't get hit while you're winding it up. This whole set of armor and this weapon that I got from the caravan was super worth it, but then I went back to the same caravan to see if I could loot it twice, but no dice. Once you've got the loot, the chest will be empty, but of course you still go and get the runes from the slain enemies, so it could be a good way to farm to get some levels. There are 7 player states as far as I'm aware at this stage. There is Poison, Red Rot, Hemorrhage, Frostbite, Sleep, Madness, and Death. In my time with the game, I only experienced Poison, Hemorrhage, and Madness. The Poison lasts freaking forever and I didn't have any antidote, so I had to keep a watchful eye on the HP drain. Now, judging by the boss fight and the indicator on the screen, I'm pretty sure this one is Hemorrhage, and it seems basically like Bleed. And this absolute nightmare of a mini-boss is inflicting madness on me, which I'm assuming is like Frenzy. I could be wrong though, because I did not allow those bars to fill. I didn't experience the full status effect, and obviously being a very secretive closed network test, I couldn't really look anything up. So if I'm wrong, let me know down in the comments. And the last thing that I'll talk about is multiplayer. There is multiplayer in Elden Ring, allowing up to 4 players to play simultaneously. The items that you'll need to start summoning or invading other players can be found right after you first step into the lands between at the effigy of Martyr. There are a ton of different items that you'll need to use for the multiplayer, whether you want to put down cooperative signs or competitive ones, that will depend. Unfortunately, during the closed network test, I wasn't able to play with the multiplayer because I'm in Australia and I was probably playing at rather obscure hours and I just couldn't find anybody to summon. Which honestly, I didn't mind too much because my whole Souls experience has basically been on my own, save for a couple of bosses. Hello, Ornstein and Smo. And I really enjoy that challenge of doing it on my own and just getting completely lost in these beautiful worlds. So if jolly cooperation is your thing, it can absolutely be done in Elden Ring upon release. Unfortunately, I can't show you any gameplay here because I just wasn't able to get it to work. And you can of course set passwords both for your group and for multiplayer so that you can connect with people that you know. And honestly, I think this will be so great for me as a streamer because I'll be able to connect purely with my audience. But of course, it also won't stop those pesky invaders. I definitely look forward to trying some of the jolly cooperation after I finish my first playthrough because as I said, I really just like trying to get through solo so I have that sense of achievement. But there is absolutely no shame in playing with friends. If you need people to come in and you need to summon to get people to help you through bosses, don't feel bad. It's a hard freaking game. But I think I owe it to my audience to get absolutely stomped on by every boss and then have that moment of elation when I finally beat them after 100 attempts. Now I'm sure there are things that I have missed, but there is just so much to cover in Elden Ring. So I hope this video was helpful and I'll do a little wrap up on camera in a second. I'm just obsessed with how much is in this game, even just from the test, and I cannot wait to get into the full world. But that is where the video is going to wrap up. I wish I could show you more. There is so much to share in Elden Ring, and I'm sure there's so much that I missed. So if there's anything else that you'd like to see that I didn't cover in this video, pop it down in the comment section below, and if there are enough things that I can cover in a future video, I'll definitely do that. I hope you enjoyed this video. I just feel so blessed to be able to share my experience with Elden Ring early, and I am dying for that release date. Thank you so much for watching the video, and if you want to see my other 2 Elden Ring videos, I'll pop them down in the description below. But for now, hopefully I'll see you in my next video or in my next stream. Bye!